Welcome to the real journey of the entrepreneur. The journey of any entrepreneur begins with a decision, then writing down your vision, then the execution of that vision. It is not for the faint of heart. It is for those who understand how powerful your mind is and that you can truly create the life that you deserve. It does require a unique formula that includes belief in yourself, a lot of consistency, connecting with an OG, a lot of tears, missing out on a few events and things, and taking a whole lot of risks that will allow you to see your vision and dream come to pass. This journey of the entrepreneur is from the perspective of a wonderful mother, a business owner, whose goal is to break generational barriers and normalize the process of wealth building and financial wellness through entrepreneurship, all while creating a social and give back along the way. I am sharing this journey with you and invite you to share this process with me. Let's do this together.
Your decisions, but you have to feel comfortable to own it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I will always support you.
Thank you.
Well, hey there, good people. I hope that you all are doing well, staying safe, staying sane, and also staying warm because, we're in these strange times and I thought it would have been just a little bit warmer, but we're here and we're grateful to have you join the real journey of the entrepreneur. I have the best seat in the house, the best seat, because I get to interview experts and entrepreneurs who are willing to share and exchange education, information for those who are following this platform. My name is Anita Pierce, and I'm the host and producer of The Real Journey of the Entrepreneur. And I also just so happen to be a member of the entrepreneurship team. I belong to 11375. I'm the owner of 11375, which is a MWBE certified business consultancy that provides support, education, and services to other small businesses. And so, enough about me, because I have the distinct honor and privilege of interviewing what I call the business resource within New York State that we didn't all know about. Because the truth is, I, as an entrepreneur being in business for 7 years, just realized that we have a very great resource within New York State. We have a lot of resources, but this one is very special. The New York State Workers' Compensation Board is a phenomenal entity within New York State that can help us as business owners to be in business compliance. I had no clue, but we're about to learn more in depth from two dynamic leaders that are within this space. So the first, I'm going to introduce the chair of the New York State Workers' Compensation Board, Miss Clarissa Rodriguez. And I'm just going to give you just a little bit, because she has a wealth of experience and information that's a part and connected to her background. So I'm just going to read just a snippet. Currently, Miss Rodriguez is the chair of the New York State Workers' Compensation Board. And in this role, which she's going to describe more in depth because this is her current role, but what she does do is deal with leading and focusing on workers' compensation, disability benefits, and also paid family leave. But she's the expert, so she's going to go more in depth about that. And during her time at the board, she has led the agency through a number of important legislative reforms and implementation, including the launch of the New York's landmark paid family leave, and also working to make significant improvements to the workers' compensation system. So that's just a short snippet. I'm just gonna bring Miss Rodriguez to the table so that she can tell her own story, because usually stories are best told by the owner of it. Hi, Miss Rodriguez. Welcome, welcome.
Hello, Anita. Thank you so much for having us.
This is such a joy for me because I'm also a Brooklyn girl. So I appreciate you so much for what you're doing for our communities in Brooklyn, and for doing this wonderful podcast. I've had the pleasure of catching some of the episodes, and you bring on some really great people. So I am honored to be here.
Likewise to have you. So I want to, before we get into the meat, could you just describe just Jay, who you are in more depth, and also what is the WCB collectively?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm an attorney by trade, and I have two daughters, born and raised in New York. And I actually head this state agency called the Workers' Compensation Board. I got here after law school. I was actually working for the Legal Aid Society, helping homeowners in foreclosure. And before that, doing housing work, helping tenants where they were facing evictions. And that was always like really impactful, important work for me. And I'm so grateful that I did that. And then I had an opportunity to come on to state government to work for the board. And what the board is, it's a commissioners, it's a body of commissioners, it's 13 of us. And I am the chair of that body. And the state agency itself is run by an executive team. So I have an executive director that I delegate all the actual operations of the board. We have about 1,100 employees throughout the state and several hearing parts throughout the state. But all of our hearings are virtual, which was phenomenal that was the case, because with the pandemic, no one had to go without their hearings. No one had to go without their benefits. Everything, we were doing 1,000 hearings a day before the pandemic, 1,000 hearings a day after the pandemic. So I'm very proud of that fact. And also, as head of this agency, it comes with a couple of perks. I get to be part of the governor's administration. So I'm one of the commissioners or cabinet members that often, has to do events with the governor, speak on behalf of the governor. So that's also been really, really neat. And I was confirmed by the Senate, by the legislature. So I get to go to a lot of events with a lot of our elected officials as well. And it's really kind of full circle, because when I was in Brooklyn, I was a board member of a nonprofit there called Cypress Hills Local Development Corporation. And a lot of what we did was lobby legislators. And now I get to be kind of on the other side of that. And obviously, on my role as a public servant, I get to really impact every employer in the state of New York and make sure that the rights of employees are protected as well. So, it's a wonderful opportunity, and I'm very grateful for it.
So the WCB, why is it the best kept secret in New York State? What is it?
I don't know. It really is, right? So we are a state agency that regulates several worker benefits, right? There's workers' compensation, there's disability insurance, and there's also paid family leave insurance, as well as some other insurance products that are for volunteer firefighters and volunteer EMT workers. And even though today we're mostly going to focus on workers' comp, I'm just going to give you a very high level of what each of those is. So first, workers' compensation is an insurance product that an employer needs to secure in order to cover an employee in the event that they happen to be injured or made ill on the job, or God forbid, a fatality. So this is by no fault. What I mean is that the employee does not have to prove that the employer was negligent in any way. It's not like you're suing them for negligence. This is an insurance product that they have the right to, irrespective of whether or not the employer was at fault, right? And it also provides medical benefits for life for that work-related illness or injury, as well as wage replacement benefits, which we call indemnity, which is if you happen to be out of the job for more than 7 days as a result of that workplace injury or illness, you get up to 2/3 of your wages. And there's a calculus there, a formula there, but that's basically the max of what you can get. And then it also gives you death benefits for the surviving family members in the event of a workplace fatality. Now, disability benefits are a little different. They are for off-the-job work injuries or illnesses. So if you were disabled and it did not happen at work, you can still get disability benefits, but the wage replacements is a little different. So there you get up to $170 a week for up to 26 weeks. So it's a little different. And then we also have paid family leave, which is in 2018 was signed into law, and our agency also happens to administer those benefits. And paid family leave basically is job protected paid time off for an employee to either care for a loved one when they have a serious illness, to bond with a child. And it doesn't have to be your biological child. It could be an adopted or fostered child, or to actually assist the family when a family member is away on military duty, so deployed abroad, so that you can then step in if you happen to be the other parent, and you don't have to worry about, managing, juggling the household. You can actually take some leave and get your wages, again, up to a percentage. And during the 4-year phase-in, that percentage kept going up. And now you can take up to 12 weeks of paid time off and get up to 67% of your wages. So that's just sort of broad strokes what those insurances are. And every employer in New York State has, and Neil is going to get into that a little bit, our advocate for business, in more detail. But if you're an employer or contemplating becoming one or an entrepreneur, these are things you need to know.
Awesome. And so you want to introduce Neil? Hey, Neil.
Yes.
Hey, how are you?
I will go ahead and do that. So Neil is my advocate for business, and he works at the agency, and he reports directly to me. And he's a resource for any employer in New York State, and especially for small businesses. So take it away, Neil.
Okay, well, thank you, Clarissa. Thank you, Anita. Thanks for having us today. I look forward to answering any of the questions that you might have related to workers' compensation, paid family leave, disability, in my office.
So before we jump into all the meatiness of our conversation, just tell us a little bit about who you are and your background, because I know that you have significant business experience that now lends to the work that you do now.
Yes, my previous experience, I managed a hotel in the Catskills for 25 years, had 400 employees, year-round resort hotel. And towards the end of my employment there, I was an elected official. I was a councilman. I was the Sullivan County clerk. And I was also a board member of a not-for-profit called CASA, Court-Appointed Special Advocates for Children. So when I came to the board, I had a pretty good background in the private sector as well, and some government background also.
And so in your current role now, what does the Advocate for Business Office do? What is your role?
Okay, that's a great question. So the Advocate for Business Office was actually created out of legislation so that employers in New York State, particularly small business owners, would have one place to reach out to at the Workers' Compensation Board to have their issues handled, whether it be compliance issues or penalty issues, just knowledge, just learning what they need to know. Having one place to call was why the office was established. And what I do prior to COVID, I would travel the state from Montauk to Buffalo and do outreach to various chambers of commerces, business associations, entrepreneurial, so just like we're doing today in person, and hope to be doing that again in the near future, and explain to people, what is workers' compensation? Who needs it? How do you get it? The issues that we're going to go over today. And as mentioned before, I report directly to the chair, Ms. Rodriguez, and in doing so, have the opportunity to report back to her what I learned when I talk to these business associations and hear what they have to say. Maybe they have some issues that we need to address here at the board. So I can bring them to her attention and she can facilitate that process.
Now, you just mentioned about workers' compensation. What is it and what does it cover? for
Okay.
for those who need it or have to have it within their business structure?
Okay. So Clarissa touched on it briefly. Workers' compensation insurance is a mandated insurance in New York State for businesses with employees. And what it does is it covers those employees if they get injured while they're working. It protects the employer because there's no lawsuit. The injured worker has the insurance. It's going to cover their medical treatment, and it's going to cover their lost wages for the period of time that they're out of work. That medical coverage is going to last the lifetime of that injury. Okay. So that's workers' comp. Disability insurance, as mentioned before, is also covers the employee for off-the-job accidents, injuries, or illnesses. However, that's just limited wage replacement. There's no medical coverage involved there, and that's for a maximum of 26 weeks and up to a maximum of $170 a week. So there's a big difference between workers' comp and disability insurance. And as I mentioned, businesses with employees need to get this coverage.
So I'm going to do a follow-up. So you mentioned workers' comp disability insurance, right? And you also mentioned that businesses should get this coverage. What type of businesses need this insurance?
Okay, businesses with employees need this coverage. Any kind of business that has employees needs this coverage. So who's an employee? Basically, anybody providing a service to a for-profit business could be considered to be an employee of that business if they got injured and went to a hearing. And anybody providing a service to a not-for-profit, they also can be considered an employee for that not-for-profit and would need coverage with very few exceptions. If you are a designated 501c3, IRS designated 501c3 entity, and you are paying teachers or the clergy, they do not need to be covered. But if you're a church and you are paying somebody to clean the church, they need to be covered, even though it's a not-for-profit. So it's very important that if you have employees, you have the coverage.
And so is there a specific type, or is it like considered? Because when you think of insurance, most people think about like life insurance, term, like, so it's totally different.
Yes. So workers' compensation insurance is just that. It is workers' compensation insurance. You need to purchase it from a carrier that sells New York State certified workers' comp insurance. Okay. They need to be licensed to sell that type of insurance in New York State. And there are about 250 carriers that sell it. You have Zurich and Hartford and Farmers. And there's also a New York State agency that sells it. And it's called the New York State Insurance Fund. And they are a good place for entrepreneurs to start their search. And I say that because the New York State Insurance Fund has to write you. All right, you could contact a private carrier, tell them what you do, and you want to buy workers' comp insurance, and they can look at what you do and say, you know what, we don't want to write you. It's not profitable for us. We're not going to write you. They don't have to. The New York State Insurance Fund has to write you. Unless you owe them money from a prior engagement with them and you haven't paid it back, they're not going to write you until you pay it. But you need to get that insurance, and you get it from an insurance carrier.
That's great to know. So most small businesses that I work with are within the 3 to 5 or 3 to 7 year period of starting. There are some startups that I work with. When is it most appropriate for a business owner to even think about purchasing this type of insurance?
Okay, once you decide to have employees, before you ever have an employee on your payroll, you should have this insurance in place. You'd never want to have somebody working for you and then get the insurance. Okay? An employee is covered under this insurance from day one, whether they work for you a half hour that day or they just work 1 day a week in the pay period. The moment they start working for you, you need to have that coverage in place. Okay? So if you're an employer and you're not going to have any employees, there are circumstances where workers' compensation insurance is not required. All right. If it's just you working for you and nobody else, you don't need it. If you're not going to use any subcontractors, it's just you, you do not need it. If it's a one or a two person owned corporation, and each of you, and you got to pay attention to this, but each of you need to hold at least one share of stock and all the shares together, and there's nobody else working for you, and you hold the offices of the corporation, coverage is not required. So it's two shareholders, you hold the offices of the corporation, and there's nobody else, you don't need it. If everybody's a legal partner or a member of an LLC and there's nobody else, you don't need it. But if you are a partnership and everybody's a partner, but then you hire somebody to answer the phone for that partnership, you need it. So that's who needs it, who doesn't need it, and when you should get it. And how you should get it is by reaching out to an insurance carrier to purchase it.
So I'm going to ask a follow-up question, right? Because most what I'm familiar with and what I see is the definition of an employee, right? So you gave some points as to when we actually should. What about those who are not W-2s, right? But they are 1099 contractors, and that's how they describe themselves on their taxes or how they do business. What about those?
Okay, so you remember when I started speaking earlier, I was talking about a lot of people would call my office because of penalties. So one of the penalties that pops up very often is when somebody goes into business and they want to reduce their operating costs. They don't want to pay for workers' comp insurance. They don't want to pay Social Security taxes. They just want to use, quote, 1099 independent contractors. Okay. So I'll give you an example. There's a woman, Jen, in my neighborhood who wanted to start a dog walking business. People would call her and she would arrange dog walkers for the people. The people would pay Jen. Jen would pay the dog walkers on a 1099. And she considered them independent contractors. So what happened? One of the dog walkers got bit and went to the hospital. And the first thing they asked him was, did this happen at work? And she said, yeah. It says, well, what happened? I was walking the dog bit me. And said, well, who do you work for? Pointed to Jen. Jen said, no, she's a 1099 independent contractor. So there was a hearing. And at the hearing, the judge said to Jen, what kind of business do you have? And she said, I have a dog walking business. And turned to the person, what were you doing? What type of work were you doing? I was walking a dog. So there was nothing independent. You can call it whatever you want to call it. But when it comes when the rubber hits the road, there's nothing independent there. Okay. If Jen had called somebody to build a sign for her dog walking business, that's independent. They're not doing anything related to dog walking, but you can't just call something. So we have a really good website, and it's on the ribbon at the bottom of the screen, and also it's wcb.ny.gov, and on it you can look up independent contractor, and you'll see the criteria that will be used to determine true independent contract, not just how you pay them, but are you providing them? Are you telling them what to do? Are you giving them direction and control? Do they have their own federal employer identification number? Are they truly an independent business? In the construction industry, there's a Construction Industry Fair Play Act, and there you have to meet certain specific requirements. So if you're in that industry, I urge you to go to the Department of Labor's website and look up the Construction Industry Fair Play Act and make sure you're in compliance with that. Don't get fooled by the independent contractor scenario. Okay? We don't care how you pay somebody. It's the relationship between what you do and what these people are doing, whether or not they would be considered employees. The best way to know somebody's not an employee is if they have their own workers' comp policy. Then you know they're independent. All right. So I think that should answer that question.
So you're talking. So I wanted to do just a quick follow-up about the policies. Should they be written in the business owner's operation booklet or guidelines?
Well, as far as workers' comp policy, you don't need to put that in your business plan. You need to purchase the insurance. The insurance carrier is going to give you a poster that you hang where your employees can see it, and it shows them not only that you have the coverage, but who the carrier is if they want to file a claim. One of the things that was not mentioned, I didn't mention earlier, is how much it costs.
Right.
All right. How much does workers' comp insurance cost, and how do they figure it out? Well, workers' comp insurance, the premium, that's the cost, is an estimated premium. All right. You're going to call a carrier, tell them what you do, how many employees you think you're going to have, what you think your payroll is going to be, and what it is they do. And they're going to come up with a classification code, which is there are like, I don't know, 400 class codes of the different types of work that are out there. And they'll apply that class code. Let's say everyone working for you is going to do clerical work. Not very dangerous. So the cost for that type of work is maybe 30 cents. And they apply that to each $100 of your payroll. So it's 30 cents per $100 of payroll. Maybe they're construction workers, and that's very dangerous. The more hazardous, the more expensive, obviously. So it might be $85 per $100 of payroll. It depends on what you do. And then at the end of the year, they're going to audit your books. Remember, I said it was estimated. And they're going to see, did you have the amount of employees you thought you were going to have? Did you have the payroll you thought you were going to have? And they're going to adjust it. They're either going to ask you for more money, or they're going to give you back money, or they're going to say, you hit it right on the head and you were correct. So you pay that premium. You can pay it monthly and put a down payment and pay it monthly, or you can pay it all at once. But that's how you get it, and that's how they come up with the cost of it.
So I'm going to ask you, you mentioned earlier about penalties and the penalties about if you don't have insurance and what someone can do if they do receive a notice of penalty.
Yes, there are pretty severe penalties for business owners who do not carry workers' compensation and disability insurance. For workers' compensation, if you didn't have it and you were supposed to have it, you could be penalized up to $2,000 for every 10 days you didn't have it, which would equal $72,000 a year. And if you had up to 5 employees, it would be a misdemeanor. And more than 5 employees working for you without coverage is a Class C felony, all right, that carry additional penalties and actual jail time. So you never want to not have that coverage, okay? If you did receive a penalty, if you did have you made a mistake and you missed a payment and the insurance carrier canceled you, you can appeal that penalty to the board. You would contact the board, and we would ask you if you had the current coverage, because the goal is compliance. We want to make sure that business owners have this insurance to protect their workers and to also have a level business playing field, so all businesses are playing fairly. So if you had the coverage in place, you'd send a letter saying, we had a problem, we made a mistake, please appeal the penalty. What we would do then is get a copy of your current policy, see what it is you're paying, what's your premium, and adjust the penalty to cover the cost of the period of lapse that you didn't have it. So instead of a $72,000 penalty for not, let's say you hired a nanny and you had it for a year and you didn't have coverage, you didn't know you needed it, and we found you got a letter from us saying you owe us $72,000. You call my office, we find out you got the coverage, you found out you didn't have it, you got it. You'd send us a copy of the declaration page of your policy, which would show it costs $400 a year for that coverage. We would times that by 4 for the period of lapse. So you, instead of $72,000, you would owe us $1,600. And that's how the appeal process will work. What doesn't work is sticking your head in the sand thinking it's going to go away. That ain't going to work. It's not going to go away. We're like the gift that keeps on giving. We're going to just keep raising that price until you pay that penalty or address it. All right. So our email again is wcb.ny.gov. You're going to have my direct telephone line and my direct email. So if you know anybody that has a penalty, please contact our office and we'll work with you. There's also another thing that if you have a penalty with us, you go on a debarment list, which means you cannot, any penalty with us whatsoever, you cannot get bid on any contract in the state of New York for a year. So if you're in that kind of business, you never want to get a penalty with us because there's no way, the only way off the debarment list is if you shouldn't have been on it. So you never want to get a penalty. Remember, I told you a little bit about that audit. When you get your premium for your workers' comp, they're going to look at your books after a year. A lot of times businesses have discrepancies with the carrier. They argue over that audit and they let their premium, they let the policy cancel. They end up winning the argument, but then losing the war because now they get a penalty from us. Even if we reduce it, they're still on that debarment list. And if they're in the business of contracting with the state, they're out of luck for a year. No way off it. I get calls on that daily. And it's very, very frustrating because they didn't need to end up there.
And so I am going to bring back our chair, Ms. Rodriguez. So welcome back. In wrapping up this amazing, it should no longer be a secret that your office exists and that you are there really to help business owners advocate and also support them within the realm of entrepreneurship. Any final thoughts from either you or Neil that you can offer as additional tips and solutions for small businesses within this space? I'll start with the chairwoman.
Yeah, I'd like to say that there are several other state agencies that also have similar resources. None as good as Neil, like a designated ombudsman, but you should also look into what the Department of Labor has to say. Like Neil said, it's all about informing yourselves, right? In the beginning, it could feel overwhelming, but there are resources out there and there are tons of YouTube videos, not just on our page, but also the Department of Labor. So just arm yourself with as much information as possible, because sometimes it's easier to do that. And even if you have to feel a little bit overwhelmed, than to then have to fix the problem on the back end, right? Things get a little bit more complicated when you do that.
And I would just reiterate that my office is here as a resource. The main reason we're doing this today is so I can get that word out that we are here. And I have a large staff that answers questions on a daily basis. And I would also suggest anybody looking to go into business can go on to New York Business Express, the website, New York Business Express. And that you'll get a good understanding of what the other entities require. The Department of Taxation and Finance, Department of Labor, Internal Revenue. There's a lot to look at, and we're just a piece of it. But New York Business Express can give you a good overview of the whole pie.
And so on that note, this will be no longer the best kept secret in New York State.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to educate us and to keep us informed about how we can remain compliant within our businesses. Thank you so much. And also to reach out to the New York State Workers' Compensation Board, you can check them out at wcb.ny.gov. And also they are on all the social platforms, so you cannot say that you did not know. It's New York State Workers' Comp on Twitter, on Facebook and Instagram, New York, WCB as well. And also you can call, because the number still exists, 518-486-3331. Thank you so much for joining, and I look forward to connecting with you all again very soon.
Thank you so much, Anita. Thank you for having us. Take care.
Hey, you too. Now. So again, resources. This one is attached to the New York State Workers' Compensation Board, is an agency within New York State. A lot of the states do have very similar setups. We just so happen to be out of New York State. And so want to also just have you reminded that their information does exist. It is scrolling at the bottom of the platform. But Neil also mentioned that within his job, what he was doing, prior to the pandemic was that he was actually going to the chambers of commerce all over New York State. New York State is pretty big. So I wanted to just share that these are some of the places that Neil may have mentioned. There's Queens, upstate New York, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Staten Island, those within the 5 boroughs. And there's also some within upstate New York as well. So Neil is all over the place. So I'm sure that as we begin to figure out what our new normal is, that you'll probably be bumping into Neil along the way. So on that note, I want to thank you so much for taking time to be a part of this process, to learn more about how you can stay compliant, be compliant within your business. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us for our services. You can also find 11375 also on the platforms, Instagram, Facebook. They even have us on TikTok because I have a group of amazing young folks that felt like I needed to be there. Anyway, another story. You can call us at 718-691-8966, and also happy to support and share your process with us. So on that note, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. Talk to you again soon. So long.